Everybody full of energy. The fact that this is not going to be a talk, you doze and do your email, it is going to involve you actually doing something. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, so general outline. First up, if I could show you the nearest thing that the FBI has to a Jedi mind trick and get you using it with the next few minutes, is that okay with you? Would that be something that would be of interest? Excellent. And then, if we could then take that up to the next level, such that you've got an extra tool that you can use to build a connection with anybody, even if they're not in the same room as you, and even if you don't like them. Might that be useful? Yeah. Excellent. So do come in, guys. There's plenty of spare seats around. Don't stand on ceremony. I'm going to say, guys, don't stand on ceremony. If I'm not making sense, if you have immediate questions, if there's something burning you want to say it. Stick your hand up if you feel the urge, but do feel free to heckle. Couple of things before we get going. In the privacy of your own brain, for something we're going to use a little bit later on, have a think about your answer to this question. Your organisation is like what? There are no right or wrong answers. Whatever comes up for you is fine. Do come in. There's seats in the middle rows here. No right or wrong answers. Now, make a note of your answer to that question. Your organisation is like what? Write it down, draw it, tap it into your phone, make a note of it for later on. And while you're making a note, what's one specific context in your life at the moment, ideally your working life, where you would like them to get it? Whoever they are, you want them to get it. What's one specific context? And again, we'll come back to that later on.
To get it from that organization?
The get it could be anything that's important to you. Doesn't have to be about your organisation. So if you've got a father-in-law who persists in being annoying, that might be the context in which you might want them to get it. If you've got a boss who really doesn't seem to understand how important this issue, whatever this issue is, and you want them to get it, write down that context. So whatever it is for you is fine. Just have something in mind. Helps to focus the attention, I find, if you've got a specific context to go with. So that's where we're starting. And let's get into some activity. It's going to be in pairs. You're going to be talking to one of the people next to you. If, as we start the activity, you don't have a partner, I'll get you to stick your hand up. And I reckon we'll have pairs, more or less. Excellent. If you're really not up for doing activities, now's a good time to leave the room because there is going to be more of this. It's labelled workshop, so that seems to me it's given me carte blanche to play with you. Is that okay? So, here's the game. The first person talks about their answer to that first question. Your organisation is like what? And the partner encourages them by repeating their last 3 words or 3 keywords. And we keep going until about 2 minutes. At the end of 2 minutes, I'll give the signal. Is everybody familiar with this signal? When you see my hand go up, you put your hand up and you stop talking. Magically brings the room to order, then we swap over. Straightforward. Let me just show you what I mean. Would you be willing to stand or not, as you prefer? But so your organisation is like what?
I think that my organization is like a bit sick snake.
Sick snake.
Yeah, you know, because I think that like normal snakes, they can swirl around, like make a spiral, and this one can't. So it's like laying all the line.
And laying all the line.
Yeah, and then in this line, all the parts of the snakes, some are together and some are far away from each other.
And parts of the snake.
Yeah, and I would like those parts of the snake be healthy and be in a circle so that they communicate better.
And a circle.
Yeah, because I think that this circle feels healthier for interaction.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that demonstration. Lovely. Get the idea? Simples, as they say. So, person next to you, quickly decide who's going to go first, and off you go. Everybody managing? Okay, swap over. Nicely done, everybody. I reckon we're disturbing the next room. That's the test.
They are up and down.
Up, down, and side to side. If we can get the volume high enough to actually disrupt the other lectures, that would be awesome. It's one of the ways I test whether these talks have been successful. Now, while we do the next bit, can I invite you to pass these round? Take one and pass them on.
One per person?
Yeah, just take one and then pass them to the next person. Don't hand them round. There's no need. Oh, efficiency. Excellent. So, during that activity, what did you notice? What did you notice first? What did you notice when you were the one being listened to? You wanted to talk more. Yeah. Anything else about that?
You went into further detail and you kind of unlocked things that you didn't really realise you were saying.
Yes, you went into more detail. You unlocked things you didn't really realise. Anything else that you noticed when you were the one doing the talking?
Oh, no, I was going to say when I was asking questions.
Now, hang on to that for a minute.
So when you're talking, you build rapport more quickly with the person.
Yes, you're building rapport very quickly with the other person. Isn't that interesting? Somebody over there, Elaine?
How unlike normal work it is.
How unlike normal work it is. That's interesting. Anything else about when you were the one doing the talking? How did it feel?
Just having the words played back to you, sent me down a different path, or maybe focus on a particular aspect, and maybe I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, so it sent you down a different path or made you focus on something you hadn't thought of. Anything else about all of that? Liz?
Reminded me very strongly of improv's yes and pattern.
The improv yes and pattern. Is anyone familiar with the yes and pattern? Quick show of hands. Who's not familiar with yes and? Ooh, we'd better do this then, hadn't we? In a moment, we'll come back to yes and, because I think it's really, really awesome suggestion. Thank you for that. You've already done your talk, haven't you? I'm not stealing any material from later. No, excellent. So, anything else about what you noticed when you were doing the talking?
It made me smile.
It made you smile. It was nice to be listened to.
It made me think more about what I was saying.
It made you think more. It made you smile. Think it through. Smile. It was nice.
It makes my word sound strange, so then I start doubting them, and I start analyzing them more and go deeper and maybe contradict myself from the first sentence, which is important.
So you might doubt yourself, you might need to go deeper, contradict yourself. And even though it might make you doubt yourself, for most people most of the time, this is a pleasant experience. Not all the time, but most people most of the time tend to enjoy this. Now, when you were doing the repeating back, when you were the questioner, obviously it's an unfamiliar activity. Therefore, it's not going to be totally natural and comfortable yet. What else was there about when you were...
I just found I was wanting to ask certain questions to take it one way, but the conversation went a different way.
The conversation went not necessarily the way you wanted to ask the questions.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that in a moment, after we've done the yes and bit. Any other quick points about when you were being the listener, the one playing back the words?
I didn't feel like I was picking up everything she was saying. I was listening in for keywords.
Yes, you weren't picking everything up, just listening for keywords.
Yes, if you weren't doing just the last 3 words, but picking up on keywords, there was a certain amount of power and able to direct the
Yeah. You had the power to direct the conversation. The other person seemed compelled. Alan?
I had a very different experience. I was very tense. I was constantly repeating the last two words. I didn't really take much in as to what was going on. I was constantly work out where this was going to stop.
Yeah.
After the first conversation,
Yeah.
I felt exhausted.
Yeah. So being the person doing the repeating back, particularly when it's unfamiliar, is not always a lovely experience. It's sometimes extremely uncomfortable. It's unfamiliar, it's different, it requires you to listen quite acutely so that you've got some words to repeat back, and it gives you the power to direct the conversation.
Sorry, that's the point I was actually going to make. So as the listener, I actually felt I could control, because I could choose which keywords I wanted to pick up on. And based on that and repeating those back, I could almost sort of divert what the other person was saying a little bit.
It's almost like you've got a spotlight that you're directing, and you're using a torch or a spotlight to move their attention around.
I didn't have that experience.
Yeah.
I couldn't pick up on keywords. The only connection I had was to use the intonation of my voice to make the last two words into a question or humorous or something. I did not feel in control at all.
Yeah. So notice that the differences of experience in this one, it's not all the same. Everyone will have a different experience. One last point, and then we need to move on.
Sometimes people with keywords, there's almost a feeling that you come across as content, just repeating keywords. People will see through what you're doing, but being on the receiving end of it, that's very often not the case.
Isn't it interesting, the contrast between the receiving end and the delivery end? It's an unequal relationship. And when you notice this, you can see why perhaps it's not what usually happens at work, because it's uncomfortable to get started doing it. However, it has a high value. That thing that you just did has been described by Chris Voss, who was the FBI's lead international hostage negotiator, of the entirety of the FBI's hostage negotiation skill set. Mirroring, by which he means reflecting back 3 words, is the closest one gets to a Jedi mind trick. Simple and yet uncannily effective. Now bear in mind that an FBI hostage negotiator is by definition negotiating with somebody who is not like them. They're negotiating with the baddies. They represent the side of the good. We have to assume the FBI represents the side of the good, I'm sure we do. But I think, in general terms, we can assume that these are not people who love each other. The 2 people on the other end of the telephone or on the other side of the locked door, it's not going to be somebody you like, but you can still use this technique. And that strikes me as particularly interesting and potentially high value for our situations. It's also a technique which pays. This piece of research by the University of Nijmegen demonstrated that waiting staff were able to increase their tips by 70% simply by repeating back the order. These are not the person's own words, they're the words they've read off the menu. But by using the exact words, rather than saying coming right up, the tips went up. So, how this works is really terrifyingly simple. People like people who are like them, and when you use their words, they infer that you are like them. Now, it isn't particularly comfortable when you do it for the first time. It does take practice, but when you do it well, it becomes invisible. The example that Chris Voss uses in his book is, he now runs a consultancy. One of his consultants came to visit him on his boat. They all have boats, don't they, these American consultants who write boats. So his colleague came to visit him on his boat, and Chris Voss's son was there. The associate wanted to convince Chris of something important, but they were just there and they were just chatting, or so Chris thought. They were chatting away on the boat, and they were chatting, and they'd been chatting away for 45 minutes. And gradually the son was... And eventually he could hold it in no longer. He said, "Dad, have you not noticed what he's been doing?" And apparently this guy had managed 45 minutes without Chris having the slightest clue that all he was doing was repeating back keywords. So done well, it's invisible. So, everyone okay with level 1? At least in principle. Next level, add metaphor. So, I've missed it. I was going to... You'll have to wait for that. Yes, and. So, very, very quick activity with the same person. Person is going to make a statement about what they're going to do this evening. Person B is going to respond by saying, "Yes, but," and then commenting, making their own comment. When they've done that, person A is going to make the same statement again, and person B is going to respond with, "Yes, and then make their own comment. Straightforward? And again, we'll do a couple of minutes, and then I'll give the signal, because we'll lose track if we just let everybody time themselves. Everyone okay with that? So, yes and first. Sorry, yes but first, yes and second. Off you go. Now, I know that was rapid. I hope it was interesting. We don't have time for a debrief. But you get the general idea. Yes and feels different to yes but. Play with this later on in your own time, because I've just realised just how late we're going to end up if I don't move on. And so, next level of the Jedi mind tricks is just add metaphor. So you get this feeling of repeating back people's words, about nodding, agreeing, encouraging them. Add metaphor because it will get you to a deeper level very, very quickly. What I mean by metaphor is anything in which you are comparing one kind of thing to another kind of thing. When I'm using the word metaphor, in this particular context, it includes synonym, parallel, a lot of story, metonymy, whole bunches of words that are slightly different to metaphor. Group them all in the same bucket for the time being. So a metaphor in this context is where you're thinking about or describing one kind of thing in terms of another kind of thing. Metaphor is the atom of thought. We think in metaphor at an unconscious level. We can't not think in metaphor. Metaphor is the native language of the unconscious mind. And we know that we must think in metaphor because the metaphors we use in our thoughts spill out in our words. We're using something like 6 metaphors a minute, depending how you count them, depending what you include. There are something like 6 metaphors a minute in English, and it's very similar in other languages. It's not possible, as they used to think that metaphor was like a frill around the cake of language. You know, it was something that poets and musicians and speechwriters and teachers and professional persuaders would add to their language to make it come alive. But nowadays, the research has been done, the study has been done, because we can now study huge corpuses of text, we can easily see, it's obvious, there is something like 6 metaphors a minute. And this part of the talk is where I always start to stumble over my words, because I start to hear the metaphors before they come out of my mouth. And it twists my tongue. I stumble over my words. The words spill out. It's not in fact the case, it's not literally true that my words are in a pile on the floor here and I fall over. That's not what's happening. It's a metaphor. I'm comparing the action of words coming out of my mouth and the sensation that happens at that point to the action of tripping over something in a path. And so on and so forth. I wonder if you're hearing more metaphors than I am at this point. Anyone noticed any that they'd like to draw attention to?
You can see something obvious. I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah. So you're not literally seeing the obvious. Well, you may be. It's obvious that there's a blue dot there. Isn't it obvious there's a blue dot there? Well, no, there isn't a blue dot there. That's a white screen. The blue dot doesn't exist, but... But that's a bit esoteric for this time of the afternoon. But yes, often when you're talking about things being I see is an ordinary response to somebody explaining something. I understand. It means I understand. So you're explaining. You're comparing the action of understanding to the physical sensation of vision, of seeing. Oh, there's another interesting thing about metaphor. It's way beyond the scope of this talk, but I've got to mention it. Metaphor is one way. People often talk about it being confusing which is the metaphor and which is the real thing, and they get muddled up. It's really obvious. Metaphor is a one-way street. Metaphor compares a more abstract concept to a more physical concept, to a more tangible concept. The way I like to remember it is with a line from a song that's quoted in a rather excellent book on metaphor by James Geary. The line from the song goes like this: love is like a bottle of gin, but a bottle of gin is not like love. And clearly love is like this tangible object which has this physical sensation associated with it. But you can't do it the other way around. It's quite interesting. So metaphor is my specialist subject. I didn't do the... no. So I didn't do the introduction thing at the beginning. My name's Judy Rees. I was the co-author of a book called Clean Language, Revealing Metaphors and Opening Minds. It's about the way that we can use metaphor as a hotline to the unconscious mind. And we'll talk more about clean language in a moment, after you've had a go with it. Is it okay with you having these activities and then we do the explanation afterwards? Excellent. So, here's the game. We start off by asking the question, your organisation is like what? And then you've got 2 questions that you can ask in any order, as many times as you like until I give the signal. It's going to be pretty quick fire. These are called the lazy Jedi questions. I'll come back to that story later if we've got time. But they were called the lazy Jedi questions before Chris Voss's book came out. So there is no connection between the 2 groups of Jedi mentioned in this talk, which gets very confusing. So in these questions, X represents one or more of the other person's words. So it's a step up from the earlier activity. You're still having to listen carefully so that you've got something to put into the question. You're still potentially directing their attention. Where you ask the question determines where their attention goes. And we'll come back to that again in a moment. So you've got 2 questions. What kind of X? Is there anything else about X? Somebody willing to just a very, very quick demonstration? Somebody at the back there? Who is that? Were you volunteering?
If you want.
Excellent. Your organisation...
I was voluntold there.
Yeah. Your organisation is like what?
It's like the Borg.
Like the Borg?
Like the Borg from Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. What kind of Borg?
Well, there's only one Borg. It's a collective organisation. This is when people join our company, they start to think differently over time, and their mindset becomes merged into the hive mind. And we all end up being very similar on our outlook in life.
And is there anything else about the hive mind?
Is there anything else about the hive mind?
Mm.
Well, it's a good way of working, and it encourages us to do things in a certain way. I mean, I found it quite changed me in a way that I quite enjoyed over the last few years.
And is there anything else about the Borg?
Anything else about the Borg? Well, I think in Star Trek it's seen as a bad thing, but I'm so I would like to give that impression, but I actually think it's quite cool, and it's like everybody that I know in our company, I've never met anybody that I disliked. So I don't know if they were always like that, or whether they changed or maybe because I've interviewed some people and turned them down, so maybe they never get in.
Fantastic demonstration. Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. So
Who wants to come and work for ThoughtWorks?
that's Thought Works with an X. Thought Works with an X at the end.
No. ThoughtWorks spelled.
Usual way.
One word though, doesn't have space.
Okay. Thank you for that awesome demonstration. Does everybody understand the activity? Okay. I think we might as well stay with the same person. Oh, actually, shall we swap people? Yep. Yeah, let's swap partners. So somebody else, maybe the other side, someone else. If you don't end up with a partner, stick your hand up. Ready, steady, go. Well done. I think we may have started to shake them in the next rooms. That's lovely. Please take a seat. Now, I'm really curious. What are some of the metaphors that are live in the room now? What were you talking? So, just as our friend at the back was our friend from ThoughtWorks at the back was saying, his was like the Borg. What was your organisation like?
Spinning plates.
Spinning plates. Field of landmines.
Goldfish.
Goldfish.
An Indian restaurant.
An Indian restaurant, spinning goldfish, spinning plates, field of landmines. What else?
Stem cells.
Sorry?
Stem cells.
Stem cells.
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. Who's got something different?
A Morris Minor.
A Morris Minor. They're hiring too. What else? A maturing teenager. Anything else? Jekyll and Hyde. Old man looking on his heyday. Petulant teenager. So we've got two teenagers. Just a teenager. So we've got three teenagers live in the room. So just let me check in with the three people who've got teenagers. So you've got a petulant teenager, a teenager, and a maturing teenager. Is there anything else about just a teenager?
No, I was just making a joke there, because he said petulant teenager, and I was saying it's a tautology.
Okay. So we've got two. We've got the maturing teenager and the petulant teenager. Is there anything else about the maturing teenager? I've lost track of who it was. Yeah.
Is there anything else?
Yeah, the maturing teenager.
The maturing teenager that needs now really to.
Mm-hmm. And the petulant teenager? Quite easily distracted. So the same organisation is being described in slightly different terms, but with the same general word teenager, but they're different, a maturing teenager and a petulant teenager. So what I'm going to contend is that if we went round everybody in the entire room and asked them what kind of organisation is your organisation, even if we all worked in the same place, we would find that everybody had a different metaphor. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about metaphor. Everybody is unique. And the more you ask these questions, the more you find more uniqueness. It's an absolute delight to do this. Well, we haven't got time to do the other game that I sometimes do at this point. But yes, there's a whole range of metaphors. Now, Gareth Morgan, who wrote a very famous book called Metaphors of Organisation, contended that there were 8 major metaphors of organisation. These ones: machine, organism, brain, culture, political system, psychic prison, change or flux, and instrument of domination. But he had clearly never done this activity with a room full of people. Because I think that if we took this activity out to the beach tonight and had everybody have this conversation, we would find as many metaphors as there were people out there. Now, back to my other pet subject, clean language. Clean language was devised by a psychologist, David Grove, as a precision inquiry methodology to find out about the metaphors that underpin people's thinking and that drive their behaviour. Nowadays, it's used way beyond psychology and coaching. It's used to find out about people and what's different about people, what's unique about people. It's particularly useful in complex situations with difficult human stuff. These 2 questions that we were using a moment ago are the most commonly used clean language questions. Clean language is an inquiry methodology. It's a framework built from questions. Clean language has a whole bunch of applications, and these are just a few of them. The top one is probably relevant to our subject of this afternoon: communicating beyond the bubble. When you need to communicate with someone you don't know well, with someone who is not like you, with someone who perhaps you don't like them much, the clean language questions can be your friends, because they are the upgrade from that Jedi mind trick from the FBI, the mirroring. They enabled you to have a more sophisticated way of guiding people's attention. When you get good at this stuff, you can do some really clever things with them. Some of the other ways that Agile coaches are using them around the world, I use them particularly in team development, to get a group of people, whether they're face-to-face or on an online video call, and get teams to get to know each other better and work out how each of them work at their best. This same approach has been used within Mike Burrows' Agenda Shift. He used a bunch of clean language in different places. But finding out how can everybody on this team do more of their best work more of the time. And you get metaphors for that and get them to explore those things together. My favourite example is a team that's based out in Antarctica for the season, the summer season. They do environmental cleanup, and they've dramatically increased their retention rate from season to season as a result of using clean language as a team development methodology. It also helps the teams support each other when they're out there in that remote field station every summer. Clean language has also been used in building learning cultures. Liverpool John Moores University has done a lot of work which has been well written up about it. Actually, one department, the sports science department, the number of good quality degree passes increased from, I think it was 49% up to over 70% in the course of the 3 years that this particular contingent that used clean language as a learning team methodology were there. One of those tutor groups within that year group, 9 people, they all got first-class degrees. And that's been written up as somebody's master's paper. Clean language is also very effective at handling tensions and conflict. It's been used in peace building in Northern Ireland, in the Middle East, and in South Africa. Hence, it's probably going to be marginally useful in peace building between marketing and sales. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't collapse the thing into nicey-nicey. It enables there to continue to be tension, which is quite important. And so, hot tips for communicating beyond the bubble. Mirror their words as far as you can. Match their metaphors as far as you can. Ask questions which guide their attentions. And with all the stuff we've been talking about this afternoon, practice, practice, practice. And when you practice, tell people what you're doing and share. So in all of that, how might you use all of this in the specific context that you thought about earlier, where you want them to get it? I'm going to make that a rhetorical question because I'm keeping one eye on the time. If you want more of this kind of stuff, I have a weekly link letter which talks about clean language, metaphor, lots of agile stuff, lots of remote facilitation is the other thing I do. There's a lot of that. By the way, one of the things I'm increasingly doing is teaching excellent facilitators, trainers, coaches to do the stuff they do well in the room, to do it online. If you're even vaguely interested in that kind of thing, if you're slightly nervous of doing your stuff over video conference, come and talk to me on the beach later on, because I've got lots of interesting stuff to say about it. Well, I think it's interesting anyway, and some of the customers do as well. There's a free ebook if you want more clean language stuff, and if you want to stay in touch with me, I'm easy to find on the internet. I'm all over the place. And come and talk to me later. Thank you very much indeed.